Welcome back. Investors are anxiously awaiting to see if the Federal Reserve will issue another rate cut this afternoon, a move that could affect everything from mortgage rates to the prices of stocks and bonds. It's widely expected the Fed will cut rates when its policy meeting concludes. However, what's less certain is the kind of tone that Chair Jerome Powell will set during his post-meeting news conference as he outlines how the Fed views the economy and futures policy moves. The decision comes as the ongoing government shutdown has delayed the reporting of key economic data, making it harder for policymakers to assess the current state of inflation and economic growth. The expected announcement is expected to come out at 2 p.m. Eastern. With an early preview, we've got senior economics reporter for Axios, Courtney Brown. So, Courtney, we know the last time the Fed met, they cut rates. Is that the same thing that you're expecting now? And what's the impact of the fact that they're basically flying blind without some key metrics that they usually use to forecast what rate cuts could look like?
They will almost certainly cut rates this afternoon. As you laid out so nicely, the big question is, do we get one more? They have one more meeting in 2025 in December. And does Fed Chair Jerome Powell see the Fed taking yet another step to lower borrowing costs around the economy? As you mentioned, there is no data. For a central bank that says it's data dependent, how are you making these decisions without any data? That is the huge question I think Chair Powell will get today when we all gather at the press conference over at the Federal Reserve. And I think the other question is, you know, the Fed has framed these interest rate cuts as a way to protect the labor market. And I wonder, with some of the labor market announcements that we're seeing just anecdotally from large corporations announcing layoffs, is it too late? Are they moving from a position that was supposed to be protecting the labor market to now having to race and catch up and actually save the labor market in real time?
We're going to talk about those layoffs, too, because I think there's a larger conversation around the impact of AI in the job market happening. But before we do that, what are your sources saying about how they are making this rate cut decision? I mean, I feel like for the past few months, the anticipation has been once the Fed got to fall, the rate cuts were going to start happening. Do they even need the data to make those decisions, or is that just sort of baked in the cake at this point?
I think Fed Chair Powell is going to be very careful this afternoon not to suggest that they're on some sort of preset path. But what he's going to say is that they are looking at private sector data. Government data is the gold standard of the world, right? So it's not perfect, but they do have private sector readings on the labor market, on prices. We did get the consumer price index, a kind of one-off report that's not expected to be repeated as long as the government continues to be shut down. And, you know, there's 12 Reserve Bank presidents, and they spend all their time going around their communities asking their business contacts, well, what are you seeing with prices? What are you doing with hiring? And I think those anecdotes and that private sector data and the little government data that we've had, that's going to inform their decision today.
Yeah, and then you mentioned this, but I want to get your take on this story because the headline on the front page of the Wall Street Journal this morning is about this. Over the last week, we saw a huge wave of white-collar layoffs with major companies like Amazon, UPS, and Target announcing cuts affecting thousands of corporate roles. In their statements, companies cited in part growing pressure to operate more efficiently and embrace the use of artificial intelligence. Quickly, as we run out of time here, as we always do, what are you seeing in the fact that this is the first, I think, real impact that we're seeing of AI, something people have cautioned about for a while?
I want to set the ground a little bit. So these layoff cuts are massive. I think they're setting this tone, as you say, that AI is really starting to affect the labor market. There are 180-ish million people in the labor market. So these job cuts in the grand scheme of things are not that large. But the fear is that this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And, you know, that there is going to be this AI bloodbath for white collar workers. And there's nothing the Fed can do about that. There's only so much their policies can do. And so the attention's going to turn to the government. And what is the government going to do? What's their plan for how to protect American workers during this transition that, you know, we've been writing a lot about, could be very painful for workers?
Yeah, there's a lot of people writing about what the impact of this is going to be. And I think a lot of people looking over at policymakers saying, hey, anybody have a plan for what the impact of AI is going to be? And neither party has really staked out a position that works, either as a campaign platform or just as a policy for people to work off of going forward. But I think this is going to be one of the central issues of the 2028 election, of 2026, because it's impacting people's ability to get work. Senior economics reporter for Axios, Courtney Brown, always love having you. Thank you for previewing all of it for us.